Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Lenker, and I am the romance columnist at Document Weekly. And I'm really excited to be here today to speak to all of you. We have four amazing authors with us. And so I'm just going to kick things off by letting them introduce themselves and their latest or upcoming release. Roan, why don't you start?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Roan Parrish. This is my book that's coming out on the 25th of this month. I just got these shiny little paperbacks today. Better Than People is sort of my love letter to animals. And I'm not sure if you can see, I have this little hanger-on here who really wants to be a part of this. So Better Than People is the story of Jack, who's a grouchy, kind of lives in a cabin in the woods children's book illustrator who hates people because he's been screwed over his whole life. And Simon, who is an animal lover who enters the picture when Jack breaks his leg one day and needs help walking his brood of rescue animals that he's collected over the years. Simon has struggled with anxiety and shyness his entire life, and so he's always connected more with animals than people. And so these two characters each live kind of in their own worlds, sharing much of themselves with animals more than with people. And then when they come together, they have this sort of like dancing around each other, like when you introduce two cats who don't quite get along, attitude where they're a little bit curious about each other. No, everything's terrible. People are the worst. Ignore each other. And then coming back together. And it's really the animals who sort of bring them together. Through walking the dogs, playing with the cats, and watching the way they are so, what's the word? Emotionally authentic, I guess. They never pretend to be anything they aren't. They don't pretend they like you if they don't. They'll scratch your eyes out if they want to. And taking cues from that, the two fall in love in this cabin in the woods in Wyoming. And I thought I could read a little piece. I don't know if that is a thing that is welcome for us to do.
Yeah, absolutely, if you want.
Sure. I thought I would just read the first piece where Jack and Simon meet, because I think to give the flavor of like this crew of animals, give you a little taste. So Jack has broken his leg and is laid up on the couch and is just desperately trying to get this person to help him walk his dogs. So he says to the animals, "Be extremely cute so this guy likes you." He yanked the door open. There, with one hand half raised to knock, stood a man made of contrasts. He was tall, only an inch or two shorter than Jack's 6'3", but his shoulders were hunched and his head was hung low like he was trying to disappear. When he lifted his chin and glanced up at Jack for just an instant, Jack couldn't pay attention to anything but his eyes. A burning turquoise blue that shocked him, because after years of drawing, he'd always thought blue was a cool color, but not this blue. This was the blue of neon and molten glass and the inside of a planet. This was the blue of fire. "Hey, I'm Jack." Jack held his hand. Simon inched forward slowly. Then he shoved his hands in his pockets and scuffed his heel on the ground. He had messy dark hair that from Jack's view of the top of his head was mostly swirls of cowlicks. "You want to come in and meet the pack?" Jack tried again, attempting to infuse geniality into his voice instead of the exhausted, pained irritation he felt at every dimension of his current situation. Simon tensed and scuffed his heel again. "I won't bite," Jack said, shuffling backward to make room. "Can't say the same for Pirate, though. She's a little monster." Oh, God, a dad joke. Great first impression, Matheson. But Simon gave a jerky nod and followed him inside. When Jack reached to close the door behind him, one of his crutches caught and slid to the ground. Jack swore and grimaced for it, avoiding wrenching his ribs at the last moment by deviating to grab the doorknob instead. "Mind if we sit down?" Jack saw Simon's nostrils twitch and begged the universe that Simon wouldn't turn around and see the utter shambolic trough that was his kitchen floor. He dropped dog food and cat food all over the kitchen floor. When nothing else seemed forthcoming, Jack launched into introductions to the animals and watched Simon unfold. When Jack gave the signal to allow Bernard to approach, the dog cuddled Simon so aggressively that Simon ended up sitting on the floor. Bernard licked his face and snuffled into his armpit, and Simon huffed out a sound that might have been a laugh. Jack caught a flash of blue fire through his dark hair. "This is Puddles," Jack went on. "He's a neurotic dude. Hates puddles. Seriously, you have to pick him up and carry him over them." Simon held out his hand, head still bowed. Puddles placed his chin into Simon's hand and then sat down right next to him, pressing himself against Simon's hip. "Hey, Puddles." It was so soft, Jack almost didn't hear it. Puddles kept leaning into Simon. "That's Rat," Jack pointed to the tiny dog whose hairless tail whipped across the floor. "And Dandelion." The cheerful mutt wriggled happily when Simon pet her. Then cats attack Simon's scarf, and I will leave you there. But really, it's a kind of love letter to the way that animals bring unexpected joy and chaos into our lives, and the way sometimes that's exactly what we need to let ourselves open up and fall in love.
Fabulous. Alisha, do you want to go next?
Sure thing. I'm not reading. That was such a good job, Roan. I don't want to follow that up. It's such a cute premise, though. I love it. So I am in the middle of writing my modern love series, which starts with The Right Swipe. Is the first book in the series, and it was most notably a Target Diverse Book Clubs read, and also on the Indie Next list. And both it and its sequel, Girl Gone Viral, were also library reads picks. And Girl Gone Viral actually just came out. It's a little quarantine baby. It came out in March. And what the series is about, it's about 3 roommates, and they're all tech entrepreneurs. The first one is about dating apps. And the second one, it's about a girl who goes viral, kind of against her will, sort of. Somebody live tweets a conversation she's having, and suddenly the entire internet is on the hunt for this girl in a cafe. But she has panic disorder and a lot of anxiety, and so this is like her worst nightmare. So she kind of goes on the run. Luckily, she happens to have a handsome bodyguard, as we all should. And they go on the run to his family's beach farm in Northern California, in a real little city that's wonderful, that I went to, where most of our country's beaches comes from, oddly enough, not Georgia. So that was the last book in the series. And the third book in the series is about the heroine. She's an influencer. I was always just really fascinated by influencer culture, and I don't think that, it gets enough of a good representation as like how hardworking and, like these kids are hustlers, so I wanted to sort of show that. And so Gia, who is the third heroine, she's an influencer, and she falls in like with a guy who is in her DMs, who also happens to be this famous Bollywood actor. And she gets fed up a little bit because he won't meet her in person, even though they're both happen to be, he comes to LA and he won't see her. And so she's a little confused. So she goes and confronts him, and he has no idea who she is. Luckily, sparks still fly between them. So we get to see their journey. And that is called First Comes Like. First Comes Like. It comes out in February of 2021, just in time for everyone's little Valentine's Day displays, hopefully.
Amazing.
So yeah, that is the Modern Love series, 1, 2, 3, and it'll be done in February.
Great. Suzanne, let's have you go next.
Hi. This is my adult debut. It is coming out on Tuesday, the 18th, so next week. So the timing is soon. Oh my goodness. But yes, this is my adult debut. It is a workplace romantic comedy set in the male-dominated video game industry. And in this book, coming out next week, Melody Ju, she's a Korean-American video game producer, and she is tasked with releasing a controversial video game, all while being antagonized by everyone around her, including the new MBA intern, who happens to be the CEO's nephew. So I tend to write stories about awkward nerds who find new love. So with every story I write, there's usually a coming to age element that takes place as well. So there's definitely a coming to age plus romance. I consider this kind of squarely in the rom-com. I don't even know what it's called, a genre or subgenre, but because I think when I wrote this book, I had always wanted to write a workplace comedy and a romantic comedy. And so 4 years ago, when I started researching this, I wanted to write about gaming and the game industry and didn't know too much about it. I just knew I liked playing video games and had a lot of friends who were gamers and worked at game companies. But the more, and I even took a tour of one of the biggest game companies in the United States and was just in shock by all of the things that I saw, which included like busty women with AK-47s and things that just were really shocking to see just in a workplace. So I remember thinking, well, I'll have to write about this, but everywhere I turned in the office, there was something else that shocked me. So a lot of the things that are in this book are actually things that I observed or through interviews and through reading lots of articles and going to panels. Did a ton of research for this. But to tell the story where there's a lot of misogyny in gaming, I really wanted to make sure that I tempered it with a lot of humor and levity. So you'll see a lot of seriousness in the story, but also hopefully balancing that with humor. So in the story though, Loathe at First Sight, obviously it refers to the key enemies to lovers romance that is in the story, but it also refers to the vocal naysayers who are out to see the main heroine fail, and she just won't let that happen. So that is the summary of Loathe at First Sight.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Alexandra.
Hi. So Written in the Stars is my debut. It is an Own Voices queer holiday rom-com. It's kind of a riff off of Pride and Prejudice and Bridget Jones's Diary. I definitely use the archetypes of Elizabeth and Darcy more so than a strict retelling of the plot. So it features a free-spirited social media astrologer, Elle, who agrees to fake date a straight-laced actuary, Darcy, over the holidays in order to get their well-meaning but meddlesome families off their backs, and hijinks ensue, of course. And it takes a turn and it becomes more than either of them bargained for. I would say that, you know, enemies to lovers and opposites attract and grump falls for sunshine are my favorite tropes. And so I definitely use all of those in Written in the Stars. You know, I was trying to think of two careers that couldn't be more polar opposite. And so I have an astrologer and an actuary who seem so opposite, so logical, and so, you know, looking at numbers and looking at the stars, but they end up having so much more in common. They're really looking for their perfect person. And so in dealing with some family drama, which is a little heavy, but I keep it light because it is a rom-com, they end up realizing that they have a lot in common, and they work through their differences and really realize that their quirks are appealing to both of them. And I hope that it's a hopeful story. I think we can all use a little bit of hope and a little bit of levity, especially in 2020, where everything is kind of a dumpster fire. And they, you know, reveal their vulnerabilities. So I think it will appeal to, you know, lovers of, you know, CoStar and Sanctuary World and all the viral astrology apps, lovers of the rom-coms of the late 90s and early aughts. And, you know, that's pretty much Written in the Stars. It's a bit of a nod to my favorite rom-coms and, you know, social media astrology.
Fantastic. Well, so as you all can see, there's really a wide range of storytelling going on here, and this is specifically all happening within the contemporary space, and there are lots of other subgenres within romance. And so we're kind of here to today to talk about how romance can be a really potent force in your store, because romance readers are a very devoted group of readers. They're always looking for their new favorite author. So they're really keyed into their favorites and getting their next favorite in the series, but also always on the horizon for new, fresh voices, people that are going to scratch that itch. As you can see from the panel we've assembled and the stories that everyone is telling, it also is a very diverse genre. It's LGBTQ plus inclusive and all of those things. So any stereotypes you may hear that suggest otherwise, there's certainly books that fall within those categories, but the best of the genre is not subject to it. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of changes with romance gaining more traction in bookstores. Romance readers are always looking for a space where they will be welcome, someplace they know that they're not going to be rebuffed or mocked. And as soon as they know that's true, we promise they will become voracious readers and buyers and your biggest champions, because romance readers are also very vocal about their feelings. They have a lot of them and they are happy to share them. Just these last few years, we've seen growth in terms of stores starting to introduce their own romance section, and having designated space for romance is also something that is really key and important. Romance readers and authors want to see that you're offering us a welcoming space and we're not just an afterthought or a Valentine's Day display, as Alisha so wonderfully noted. We love those. We love those call outs and that chance to be in the front of the store or the window or anything like that. And lastly, I just wanted to call out Romance Bookstore Day, which is this Saturday. That's a new event. This is going to be its second annual year, and that's just one example of how romance in bookstores is growing and changing. As I said, it's only the second year, and the amount of participants has grown exponentially. Partly, I think, because this year it's going to be all virtual, which really gives people a new opportunity. But I wanted to start by asking our authors, you guys are all contemporary authors. So I guess, can you just talk a little bit more about what that space means, but also the importance of subgenres to romance? Because I think that's something that's really specific to romance and romance publishing that booksellers would benefit from knowing more about.
You know, I read a statistic that a lot of romance readers, like the majority of them, start under 17. And that was definitely true for me. I was like 12 or 13 years old. And as somebody who had a lot of trouble focusing, one of the great things about romance and what drew me to it, like, you know, I'd walk up and down those stacks, like, you know, like my eyes were like a, you know, homing pigeon, like looking for the right books, you know, and the great thing about romance is that you can go anywhere with it. I mean, the only requirement is a happily ever after, right? Or happily for now, or however you want to interpret that. You know, I could easily jump between historical and contemporary and paranormal and sci-fi and fantasy, and there's gems to be found in each of those. The minute zombies make a comeback, I'm releasing all my paranormals that are in my brain in one, you know, fell swoop. But right now, you know, I love writing contemporary, and one of the reasons is, you know, romance is, like a lot of media, is a representation of what's sort of going on in the world right now, no matter what subgenre you're writing. But I think we can really explore that in contemporary, where we can, you know, focus in on, you know, what matters to people today, to, you know, whatever age group or ethnicity or orientation we're writing about. You know, there's universal themes and we can tie those in. And when people read them, you know, 10 years from now, they may not be contemporary anymore, but they will definitely have a little snapshot of, you know, our life as it exists now. But yeah, you can go everywhere with it. That is the beauty of romance.
Well, something else I wanted to address as well is that Roan, I'm not quite sure the designation of yours, but all of these releases that you were just discussing are trade paperbacks, I believe. And obviously, as booksellers, you all know the difference between trade and mass market, but that is something that there's still a divide in romance. And a lot of the traction romance has been seeing is putting these illustrated trade covers out front and drawing people in, and less of a focus on mass market. And we definitely want people to be appreciating both, because they are really reflective and representative of the genre and do different things. So I wanted to ask you guys, with your trade romances, especially you, Alisha, I know you've written in mass market as well. I'm not sure the rest of you. I know, Alexandra, this is your debut. Suzanne, this is your adult debut. You know, one of the beauties of trades, and I think why we're seeing traction, is that they're bringing in new readers who maybe haven't tried romances before because of the stereotypes, and these covers are somehow conveying different information to them than the mass market. Do you find that you've adapted your writing or your themes at all to reach these new audiences, or that's kind of more just a trade designation that's on the publishing and selling side and it doesn't really impact you?
It's interesting because I think that often the work is really similar, and the work was always trade. It just didn't have a cover to match. And one of the things I love what Alisha said about the capaciousness of contemporary romance, and that it can be hilarious rom-com, it can be devastating tragedy, and all of it ends in a happily ever after. And I think that the trade covers have an ability to demonstrate that wide variety that does exist in romance, in a way that mass market covers are, I think of as being for people who already know what they love in romance. They know what they love, and they know where to find it, and they know that those covers are going to signal something to them about what's inside. And I think that for trade paperback is sort of an opportunity for those of us who were already writing stories that had huge diversity from one another to demonstrate that diversity on the outside for readers to pick up.
Yeah, I think my writing has stayed about the same. I think every series is a little bit different for me. So, you know, I adapt based on what I'm writing. You know, this series is very different from my mass market paperback series, which is more of sort of like a soap opera, the Forbidden Heart series, which is the series that came right before it. But I will say, I think also one of the attractions of trade is that it is very easy to, for readers who like to do it, and I know so many do, for bookstagrammers and for book talkers and things like that on TikTok. You know, trade is just so easy, especially with these bright poppy covers that we have going on, to bookstagram with. Like, you know, if you are, and you'll see, like, you know, if you do a display with them in the store, they're very easy to do a display with, and they're very easy to tie different colors in. By chance, even my dress matches my right swipe cover. You know,
By
so
chance.
it is by chance. This is by chance. Yes, today is by chance. Normally, it's on purpose.
Only today.
Only today, it's by chance. But you know, like, they are easy to design around, and so you'll see when you start putting them in stores. I mean, they are easy to build displays around. They're bright, they're cheerful, the colors are fun. You know, you can put them with other things, and so I think that is also part of the rise. Is technology tied into this. Like, you know, the readers are online and they want something that they can showcase kind of online as part of their personality.
Yeah.
Also, for me, it was really important to have two women on the cover of my book. And so having the illustrated covers for rom-coms and trade paperback, that was very accessible to have, you know, an illustrated Elle and Darcy. And that was one thing that I really appreciated. I think that there's also a crossover appeal between aging up YA readers into the adult space who have been getting a lot of trade paperback LGBTQ you know, representation, and they're seeking that in their adult romances. And so to have that very clearly illustrated on an adult cover, I think the trade space makes that very accessible. It's always been there, but it's been a bit more difficult in having the like the staged photography. So I'm a fan of the illustrated covers in the trade space because it makes that so accessible for diverse authors. So I'm a fan of that.
Yeah.
I agree with everybody here. As a debut, this is all new to me, and so going through the cover selection process to discussing just marketing and positioning and targeting, I'm happy to be, you know, marketed to both, you know, very hungry romance readers who are very passionate about romance. And I agree with Alexandra in that the illustrated covers for me allowed more, I I guess I was a little worried about the photography because I didn't even know what that could have looked like and if that would have been problematic. Having a Korean American on the cover and just how that would be portrayed. And there's just so much nuance there. But I think at least the way that this cover turned out made me very happy to know that they did a good job with it. And it definitely has a rom-com-y workplace feel to it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Instagram and social media, those things are more important than ever in our new landscape as we're all figuring out virtual events, both for booksellers and for authors. Social media has long been a gift and a curse for romance readers. It's a popular place for them. They like to congregate there and, as I said, share their feelings. How do you guys, obviously for the debuts, I think it's probably a reframing for you as opposed to what you were expecting or hoping for. But for those of you who this is not your debut, how is this changing or impacting your approach to interacting with readers? Because I think it's something we're all figuring out together.
I mean, I am, I think, one of the rare authors who's kind of an extrovert. And so this has been a very challenging time for me, as it is for everybody. But not having that connection with readers or doing events or, having signings or anything, which I used to do quite a, few of, has been, it was odd at first, especially because my release came out, right sort of when the quarantine started, about a couple of weeks in. But I have to say, at least we live in a time where there is social media and there is other options like this to connect with booksellers and librarians and readers. And I mean, what I did was, I started a YouTube cooking channel because I was like, well, that'll make me feel like I'm talking to people. It's called Quarantine Cuisine, if anybody's interested. It's okay if you're not. You don't have to see it. I started like a TikTok because I was like, let me see what the kids are up to. And so I've been having fun on there. I mean, there's a lot of options, and the romance community in every space that I have found, like you can go on any app, any place, and they are there and happy to chat about their favorite books, tell you, what they like and what they don't like, and, talk about attractive people. Like they are there. They're very, just interested in being a part of things. So, what a blessing it is that if nothing else, at least this isn't 1918 and we have some form to connect with each other in some way or another. So I'm pro it. It's good.
Yeah, I'm also been pro. I am an introvert, definitely, and have been a little bit always shyer around events and social media. And the thing that I'm finding the most in quarantine with book events is that people are so excited to talk about other things besides books as well. And I'm an avid baker and cooker as well, and cook, and have loved chatting with my Facebook group about recipes and swapping recipes, and everyone wants to know what people are baking, and it doesn't seem unrelated. It really seems like making those connections are the way that we have been able to bring people back into the books. And I think that was always true. I just didn't have a sense for how far afield we could go from our books to other topics and still bring people back to the books, which, I mean, it's an amazing marketing lesson to me, but I also think it opens up amazing possibilities for the future, to realize that we could actually have events that do include things that are sort of book adjacent, and still reel in a real interested readership. So that's kind of a cool thing to think about going forward for me.
I have a perspective that's different than I think probably everybody here, in that I debuted at the beginning of the pandemic with a young adult book, this book. And this is right when bookstores were closing, libraries were closing, and everything just had to shift really quickly. And it was, this came out early April, and it was just, nobody knew what was going on. No one knew how permanent it was, and everybody's just kind of clueless. And we all had to figure it out together, that debut group. And for the first time, you know, it really opened my eyes to see how important the online community was in the bookstagrammers, the librarians who went to virtual events, same with booksellers. It just really, they really embraced debuts, and I really appreciated that. And other authors too, who were very, who were veterans, also kind of reached out to help debut authors as well during that time. And this was all on social media. And so for me, I just have a very positive experience and memories, you know, associated with that. And as I move into debuting again for the adult book, a lot of those connections stayed, and I built and grown other connections as well. And I just feel like, honestly, for people debuting this year, social media has been like a lifesaver.
Well, I want to make sure we have time for, Alexandra, did you want to say something? I noticed you moving over there.
I was also going to say, what I love about these Zoom events is I can wear sweatpants while I'm on. So that's, I mean, just adding that. It's all new to me, but I love the community aspect that maybe I wouldn't be able to travel all across the country to all these different bookstores. But I feel like in doing these Zoom panels, it's supporting all these different indie bookstores and librarian events that I wouldn't have maybe been able to do otherwise. So in a way, it is more accessible, and I think it's more accessible to readers as well who can't necessarily attend those events, pandemic or not. So it's and I can wear sweatpants when I do it. So it's a win-win for me.
It definitely, for both authors and sellers, I think gives them an opportunity to address accessibility in a way that we probably have never really thought that hard about. So that's great, and something that I think we should all be thinking about how to carry forward whenever this does end. I want to give time for people who are joining us today to ask questions. So if you have questions and you haven't already, pop them into that Q&A function. Please go ahead and do that now. And before we switch over to those, just to give people a little more time, my last question is, as either an author or a reader, what are some of the pitfalls for bookstores or sellers as a romance fan? What are the things people should not do if they want to grow their romance audience?
I think that drawing attention to what people are passionate about in a way that is anything other than a shared excitement can be a real bummer. To ask for help in looking for a book or ask for recommendations, it can feel really vulnerable, especially if you're new to a genre or new to a store. And so I think doctor's office rules, like no negative talk, only collaborative problem solving, recommending, all of those kinds of things. And having a romance section that has as much care taken with it as any other section, so that you don't walk in, go to the young adult section and see these beautiful end caps and love all these beautiful covers, and then find the romance section, you know, in the back, next to the bathroom, fluorescent lighting with only spines out and like a garbage can in the corner, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say be very careful what language you use if you're not sort of a romance insider. Words like smut or trashy, those are things that, you know, we take kind of seriously. So be careful around those, unless you want.
We do have a sense of humor, but
we
only if you prove to us you're cool.
You gotta earn it. Yeah, you gotta earn it first, and then, you know, once you have your cred, we'll talk then. So be careful around things like that. And I would also, you know, just say, if you don't know where to start, like if you don't know, you know, which romances should I stalk or something like that, reach out to somebody. There are so many readers and authors who are just happy to tell you everything. Like they are delighted to give you their lists and help you out. And I guarantee you, no matter where you are, located, there is a romance author, an experienced one in your area. There are romance readers who, you know, might come in and you can chat with them, and you might even have somebody on staff, you know, be open about it and say, hey, does anyone here, you know, read romance? Give me some of your recommendations, even if you don't read them personally. And I think, you know, it's the same thing you would do with any other genre, and treat it the same way with the same level of respect. And also, like I said, a lot of romance readers start young. So if you have, especially if you are located in a college town, you have 19, 20-year-olds coming in, they might be a little shy about asking you where, you know, to find their favorite books. So, you know, as Roan mentioned, don't put it near the trash can in the back, because they may never find them and they may not want to ask you where they are.
I also would love to just mention that there are a lot of men and non-binary folks who read romance. And with the rise of Kindle, it's really easy to read things in the privacy of your own home with nobody knowing what you're reading. And my personal dream would be for bookstores to have a romance section where anybody would feel so comfortable walking into that section and proudly declaring that they're looking for so-and-so's new book. And that every bookseller in there would say, oh, awesome, here, let me show you where it is. And I think that there are romance fans who don't look like the stereotype of romance fans. And we can see that little flash of like, oh, really? You read those books? And I think it can be a little off-putting. And so it would be a dream, I think, to just have a level of, collaborative, excited respect.
Yeah, I did. I mean, another author said to me, like, oh, I feel like I have an increasing amount of, you know, men and non-binary readers now. And I thought about it and I was like, I don't think it's really increasing. I think they've always been there, but they've just been too shy maybe to come to signings or, you know, come and talk to you or anything like that. So I'm glad, you know, we are, as Roan mentioned, like, you know, make it as inclusive a place as possible for everybody. And I mean, you'll be rewarded. It's amazing to see.
Something I've also noticed is the trend of doing like blind date with a book, and where readers can pick their genre, you know, thriller, mystery, but I see romance left out a lot in terms of that, especially in some indies that I really want to support, that I love, that I've grown up with. So I think just including romance in all aspects of the sales is really important, because it can be disheartening and it can feel like you're being left out, and then just echoing the whole point of, I might call it smut, and I know what I'm talking about, but you know, if you don't, and it's said in a certain way, it can sound like you're kind of deriding the genre. And so just being careful of how you are speaking to those that are maybe introducing themselves to the genre, that aren't familiar with it. Just taking care in that regard as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, there's not much more to add, except I think for me being from just my background of having an Own Voices debut and it being a debut, I would love to see more, I guess, awareness of these types of books in bookstores, just so people know they exist, and, you know, because it's just a weird time now. But there are books that exist maybe that somebody's read, but maybe not characters who are diverse or own voices, anything like that. And it might be a way to help broaden somebody's perspective. So that's the only thing I want to add.
Yeah, great. A question from the audience for all of you is, what is your favorite part of the writing process? Finishing the book, I'm going to guess, is the answer. Hitting send on the final draft.
Yeah, you took the joke, Maureen.
Sorry.
I think for me is editing. I hate writing first drafts. I hate it with every like fiber of my being. But once the draft is done, going back in and like shaping it into something that, you know, I wouldn't slap out of someone's hands is very rewarding.
I think my favorite part is that like 9/10 of the way done moment when I can see the finish line and I'm not there yet, so it isn't over. So I get to live in the joy of being that like that snowball that's just rolling down the last little bit, gathering snow, and I know I'm gonna like pow right into the tree, but it hasn't happened yet.
I can tell you my least favorite parts, which are starting. Just the flashing cursor, the blank page with 0 words. That is the worst. But as far as just the best parts, I would say once you get past that midpoint, that midpoint hump, I think, and it's that sort of the rolling motion of getting to the end. I like that. I also like, as I'm writing, I usually give myself notes of things that I've missed or things that I need to add in and things like that, that I know eventually I need to get back to. And when I'm through that to-do list, even though if it's not perfect, I know the draft is in good shape. And then in that case, then I can do what Alisha does and edit and all that, the stuff that I like better. But I agree. I think the drafting is the worst part.
Yeah, I agree. Drafting is the worst for me. I have 2 favorite parts. It's the beginning when the idea is like percolating in my brain and I have the playlist made and I'm really getting to know my characters and I'm, jotting down notes before I put words on the page. That's my one favorite. And then my second favorite is after I've gotten my edit letter from my editor and I've, cried and I have, gone like, no, I hate this. And then I start to think about the revision and I think about, oh no, like she's right. Like my editor is right. And then I can see it all coming together and see it all melding into a more final version. So the plotting and then the revising are my 2 favorite parts of the process.
Awesome. Summer Lori asks if each of you can give a flame scale for your books, with 1 flame being the most tame and 3 flames being the hottest.
I think mine vary a little bit book to book and probably series to series. So I'd say like my Forbidden Heart series, they're all probably like solid 3s, 2.5 3s. Modern Love is probably around 2, especially the Girl Gone Viral and First Comes Like. So it's not like closed door, but they are kind of slow burn, if that helps. Heat is very subjective. So like something, I'll put something out and I'll be like, oh, this has like barely anything in it. And somebody will be like, this is the hottest thing I've ever read. And I'm like, oh, don't read my other books.
I have a flame emoji scale for my reviews at EW, which I set specific parameters to. And even with that, I'm like, I don't know. How many flames is this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very hard. Yeah. I mean, if one is like closed door, I mean, I think I'm above that. So, yeah. But very, very subjective. So sorry.
I think mine are probably in the 2.5 to 3 range of heat, but I work really hard to make any intimacy, sexual intimacy, so tied to the bones of the characters, no pun intended, that those scenes are really essential to moving the story forward. And I edit sex rigorously, so that there's nothing in there that is just there for no reason. So I think that it is really subjective, and it's also kind of, I think about how the heat functions in the book. So yeah, I would say I'm high heat, but the heat is high relevance, if that's useful.
Sure. So definitely more romance than erotica in that vein. Yeah.
I struggle with the 1 to 3 scale. I'm going to make it a 1 to 5 scale. So I would say if 1 is closed door and 5 is erotic romance, I'm somewhere between a 3 and a 4 in Written in the Stars. The sequel is a little bit more of a 4, firm 4. I definitely agree that the sex scenes have purpose in terms of growing the characters and the relationship. So it's not erotic sex scenes for the point of strictly titillation, but definitely it's not a closed door romance, but it is interesting to always see different people's scales and the subjectivity, where some people will think that it is very high heat, and then other people will think that it is it's almost closed door. So it's very subjective, but I would say on a 5 scale, it's somewhere between a 3, 4 for me.
I am rounded up a 1. Because again, I write nerdy, awkward people trying to figure out how to not bump noses and just figure out how to even date and things like that. They tend to be on the sweeter side. And then, but that doesn't diminish sort of the anxiety and the angst that they're feeling, because again, if they don't have that much experience, it's really coming through in their questioning every move, and then every little thing matters to them. So it's probably one, but I would say that the conflict and what they're feeling inside probably feels a lot more than that.
I would say heat levels are a really good thing for sellers to be aware of, because people who are dedicated romance readers or even new to the genre are definitely probably going to ask about it and want to know what they're getting into. And as everyone has said, it is very subjective, sometimes in not great ways. Roan and Alexandra, I was thinking about both of yours, how oftentimes people say heat is higher in female or male novels, which is silly, but it is something that people have to deal with, and a good thing for sellers to be aware of. But yeah, in general, whether or not you yourself are a romance reader, it's good to have some knowledge that all these levels exist and have a vague idea of where things you're recommending or putting on end caps fall, so that if someone asks you, you're able to tell them the answer. Mary Elizabeth has asked, in the time of pandemic, for all of you, what does contemporary look like for works in progress?
The $1 million question, I think, for all of us. Sorry, Alexandra, were you saying something? Do you want to go? Yeah, I think for me, this has been, I think, probably the biggest challenge of any of our writing careers, just in general, whether we're writing contemporary or not. But yeah, how do we do it? So I turned in a book May 15th, and I've been revising it ever since. And slowly, in the beginning, it was just sort of the world as it was before March 13th, 2020. And as I revised it, I realized, like, wow, this is feeling like an alternate timeline to me. Like, it was not feeling like a contemporary novel anymore. It was feeling like, like Community. Somebody had rolled a dice and we were in a whole new world now. And so I had to slowly sort of make it, add in a little bit of the real world without going, I think, too overboard and making it not a rom-com or not, a romance novel, really. But I think, everybody's reality is different now. And, I talked in the beginning about how contemporary really is a snapshot of where we are mentally and, just emotionally in this world. And so I think we're going to see parts of that played out in people's novels. I'm very, I'm interested kind of to see how different, authors are going to deal with this. First Comes Light comes out in February of 2021. I'm hands off of it from September onward. So it really is, whatever I do with it now is how it's going to be. So yeah, it's just, I think it's just a challenge for everybody beyond just the challenge of being able to write and function, while we're all quarantined too.
Yeah.
Me, in terms of writing the follow-up to Written in the Stars, which is going to come out in the summer of 2021, and I've written the first draft and the first revision. I have written it kind of, I guess, in an alternate universe now. There aren't, masks involved. It's a bit of a vacation romance, so there's not going to be like quarantining yourself for 14 days. I know that when I'm reading romance, this might change going forward, but I'm looking for a bit of an escape from reality. And so I don't necessarily at this point want to read about the life that I'm living right now in my house and dealing with social distancing and 6 feet. And I don't even know what that looks like in romance of like 6 feet. So I incorporated that in my romances, but that could definitely change going forward. And I think it might change going forward, but with the timeline that I'm on now with my books, it hasn't changed. I definitely respect the authors who are, adding that in and taking that into consideration and doing, the due diligence for that. But I haven't, mostly because I like the escape in my, especially my rom-coms. And kudos to everyone who has figured out how to incorporate that in a very authentic, but also comedic way in rom-coms in the contemporary space.
I just turned in a young adult rom-com that is coming out in June, and that gives an acknowledgement to it. It's not heavy handed on talking about it or anything, but it's as if it happened in the far past, but not so far in the future. So it definitely acknowledges it, but it's definitely a new time, new new era. So it was my way of trying to figure that out, but not have to be in that time frame. That was how I looked at it in that book. I'm currently writing my next book for Avon, and I haven't figured that out yet. So I will hopefully figure that out soon because I'm writing it now.
Yeah, I wrote the whole sequel to Better Than People during quarantine. And it doesn't touch on quarantine. It doesn't deal with it directly. And I'm not sure what will happen going forward in this series or in future books. The way that I've been thinking about it so far has been that even when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, most people have really horrible things, really scary things, really overwhelming things that are going on in their lives all the time. And sometimes those things leak into books in different ways, or leak into their romances in different ways. And I think it's really important that thinking about COVID isn't just a literal representation of COVID and the pandemic on the page. I don't think that's the only way to do it. And I think I'm a bit more interested in thinking about this epidemic, this quarantine has made us value family in a different way, value friends in a different way, value lovers in a different way. And what does it look like going forward? Maybe more books will be romances, because we've learned that those relationships are central in our lives in a way that we didn't realize. I feel like so many of the stories that have come out of quarantine have been these human interest stories of people falling in love, this window of an apartment building and this window of an apartment building, and they play tennis across the way, or they ask each other out with like picnic baskets pulleyed up to the second floor. And people don't talk about those as if they're romance novels, really, but they are. So I think I'm interested going forward in seeing how the less literal aspects of how deeply we're involved with one another, how close can we be to one another, like these are issues that are the core of romance storytelling, at their core, not literally maybe, but yeah. So I'm actually super curious going forward if these issues of interpersonal relationship and the seriousness that we give them will actually show up in the center of more kind of traditionally serious books as well.
That's a wonderful and beautiful way of looking at it. So I just want to bring things home here by mentioning Bookstore Romance Day, which is this Saturday once more. You can go to their website to find out which stores are participating, as well as additional information. And I wanted to ask all of you if right now that you would recommend sellers either read or promote on Saturday as part of Bookstore Romance Day, beyond your own, because of course everyone should read and purchase the books that
I can go. Can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Sure. I'm almost done with this book, The Boyfriend Project. I don't know if I'm holding it right so you can read it, but it says Boyfriend Project. And Natalie Yu's Magical Paris Tea Shop. Those are both Own Voices books. I really am, this one takes place in the tech industry, and so I really wanted to read this book before my book came out. And Roselle is doing an event with me later on, and she's just a fantastic writer, and I'm really I read this before, and I'm rereading it again.
Alexandra, oh no, Roan's ready. Amazing. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted visual aid. Oh yeah, so this is, I hope you can see, The Immortal City by Mae Peterson. It's the second in the Sacred Dark series. Both are out now. And this is an amazing trans-owned voices fantasy romance series. The writing is gorgeous. The characterization is so smart and tender. And it's a kind of fantasy series that I think we don't see in romance often. Amazing world building, maybe like half fantasy, half romance. And I think would really appeal to people of all ages. So yeah, that's May Peterson. Also, the covers are gorgeous.
So I've read Suzanne's book and I loved it. So definitely hand sell Loathe at First Sight. It's really cute. And I would also add Sonali Dev has some great books. Last name is spelled D-E-V. I was trying to like pull up her cover real quick, but I couldn't do it. But Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors and Recipe for Persuasion, which is her latest book. They are both fantastic, and they're sort of Austen retellings, and I love Austen retellings because I feel like they can go in so many different ways. But Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, is obviously Pride and Prejudice retelling. And another great Pride and Prejudice retelling, sorry, I'm giving you too many books, is Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. So Aisha at Last and Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. And Suzanne's book, Loathe at First Sight.
Amazing. Alexandra.
My treat to myself after I finished my revisions on book 2 was Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilson, and I loved it. Okay, so it's an extreme slow burn. I do want to stress that, extreme slow burn. I just think everyone should know that going in, but the yearning was top notch. I loved it so much. Yearning, I feel like it was a masterclass in yearning, and the characters getting together in the 3rd act. And so that was just an absolute treat that I was so happy to read after I finished Visions. So everyone should read that.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to end with 2 of my own recommendations. There's You Had Me at Hola, which Alexis Starr wrote and came out last week. And it is set in the behind the scenes world of a streaming television show that is a cross between One Day at a Time, the amazing Rita Moreno and Norman Lear show, and Jane the Virgin. And then I'm going to recommend Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, which is an incredible fake relationship story of 2 guys who could not be more different and yet somehow are perfect for each other. And this book made me never want to try to write anything else ever again because it will never be as good as this. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This was wonderful. Once again, we have Roan Parrish, Alisha Rai, Suzanne Park, and Alexandra Bellefleur. And if their books are not already out, they're coming out shortly. And thank you guys so much for joining us. And you can always find us on social media if you have further questions or recommendations. As I was saying, we're just a tweet or an Instagram DM away if you have questions about romance and stalking romance in your amazing. Bye, guys.